Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Brock, please, for 5 minutes.
Tom Clark, at your last appearance, you were emphatic when you stated you had nothing to do with the decision to sell the old official residence. You had nothing to do with the decision to buy the new official residence. You had nothing to do with deciding on its amenities or its location. So let's cut to the chase. Since 2014, plans to repair the old luxurious official residence on Park Ave were ongoing and repairs commenced. No other prior head of mission demanded an immediate replacement. On February 23, 2023, your buddy Justin Trudeau appoints you head of mission in New York City. On April the 27th, same year, just a few months later, you host a reception for your buddy. You post a video to social media of the two of you in a limousine. In and around the same time, you and your office inform GAC officials, pursuant to an ATIP, that the property is not suitable for representational activities, it's not suitable as a residence, and I'm going to highlight this, requires immediate replacement. I have it right here, ATIP, black and white, Tom Clark. No other head of mission to New York City had issued that directive before other than you, Tom Clark. We also have the infamous email dated June 17, 2024 from Emily Nicholson. States both CNGNY and HOM, that's you, Tom Clark, and staff have been instrumental throughout the process, with the head of mission, you, Tom Clark, providing the green light for the selection of the new residence. After your lies were exposed, you wrote to this committee. You tried to explain that your comments to officials were made in passing. Well, Tom Clark, that's another lie. Comments made in passing might include, how's the weather? How was your weekend? I guess my appearance at committee is not going very well today, but those are passing comments. You issued a mandated direction to your staff that was communicated to GAC officials that the official residence on Park Avenue needed an immediate replacement. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Chair, I feel I've got to correct the record here. Let me start by saying there was never a directive or a mandate from me to my staff whatsoever.
Let's talk about who in your office you spoke with, because I'm also looking at an article from the National Post. You indicate, and you're quoted, I also observed the issues between family and representational spaces. I shared these views with Consulate General Administration. So who in administration did you communicate with? Names, please, and positions.
When I first saw the residents...
Names, please. Names.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, when I first saw the residents, I was in the company...
Clark, it's a direct question. Who are the officials in your office that you spoke with and raised these concerns? Give me names, please.
Mr. Chair, I'm trying to tell you that. I am trying to say that when I arrived in New York and I saw the residents for the first time, I was...
The history, Mr. Clark. Just give me the names of the officials in your office you spoke with. It is not a difficult question. For the third time, give me names.
Mr. Chair, for the third time, I will say that when I made those comments, I was in the residence. I was not in the office. The people in the residence were the ones greeting me at the time. One was our MCO, who was Mario Bott. And quite frankly, I can't remember who else were there. I think there were about 3 or 4 other people, mainly from the property section of New York.
Table all the names of the individuals you spoke with, where you highlighted deficiencies in the official residence, whether in the residence itself, the staff, and your staff at your office in Manhattan. Will you table those names and those positions, including their email addresses, to this committee, yes or no?
Well, Mr. Chair, I will do my very best to try and remember who was in that
You also
meeting.
indicate that the comment you made about immediate replacement was made in passing to a colleague and reported to Consulate General at Global Affairs. Who was that colleague?
Mr. Chair, I never made that comment.
You're quoted in the National Post, so you can take that up with the National Post. Now, it's very clear that GAC officials earlier this week confirmed how important your mission is. You, as head of mission, are the most important official in that residence, and what you say carries great weight. So, Tom, you influenced your staff because you indicated to your staff that your champagne tastes were not suitable anymore for Park Avenue, and you needed that wonderful Central Park view on Billionaires Row. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Chair, everything that is said is inaccurate.
Mrs. Vignola, the floor is yours for 2.5, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. From what I understand, Mr. Clark, you made a comment to the effect that, well, rather you wanted it to be informal and you weren't intending for it to reach global affairs. Is that correct?
That is correct.
OK. À ce moment-là,
That being the case, I have a question for you, and I just have a couple of minutes left. So my question is, how could it be avoided in the future, this kind of situation where we're all dealing now with this event? What advice should be given to consuls general, to the staff at Global Affairs, so that there is a very clear distinction between an informal opinion that is not at all intended to influence a decision or a process, and something that is? Do you have any recommendations in that regard?
It's a very good question. I think that I would answer it this way, briefly, that the process needs to remain the process. I think that anybody coming into a new residence, you can't prevent somebody saying, wow, this is nice, or wow, this is bad. But I think that there has to be an understanding on the part of everybody, as there is now and as there was here in New York, that the process is entirely in the hands of Ottawa. I don't think it would befit any head of mission to walk in and ask for a new residence. I can't imagine anybody would do that. I certainly didn't do that. But I think that, to your point, Madame, that perhaps Homs should be told the obvious, and that is, don't interfere with with the decisions that are properly being made elsewhere.
Thank you very much. That's our time. Mr. Boulerice, please.
Oui, Monsieur Clark.
Mr. Clark, I am pleased to have you here today because I want to ask you a question about something that is of great concern to Canadians and Quebecers, and that is the arrival of the new Trump administration. And there have been very clear indications about protectionism, the imposition of tariffs, the conditions for renegotiating the U.S., Mexico, and Canadian Accord, the CUSMA. And I just wondered what you are doing in that regard.
What we are doing is talking to as many people as we possibly can. This is a time when I think this is a wonderful occasion for education. And what I find, quite frankly, when I'm dealing with issues here in the United States, so often we're pushing against an open door. There's not real resistance to dealing with Canada. It is a matter of educating people about who we are, what we bring to the table. I work closely, for example, with the Délégué Général du Québec ici à New York. We work collaboratively in terms of advancing both Canadian and Quebec interests here in New York. So on all the above questions that you asked, I think that the answer is that we need engagement, we need to talk, and we need to tell the Canadian story.
Peut-être en terminant, les États-Unis.
Well, just in conclusion, the U.S. is a federal state and the federal government has a strong role, but I would like to hear from you about the role of the states in our trade relations with our partners in the U.S.
Great question. Extremely important. As I said earlier, 4 of my 5 states, we are the #1 customer in all those states by a wide, wide margin. When you take a look at the central issue of energy, for example, Hydro-Quebec is building a line into New York City that within a year and a half is going to provide 20% of the electrical needs of New York City. That's enormous, and that's coming from Quebec. And that is a real, excuse the expression, connector between the two places. So when you deal at the state level and at the county level, you're dealing with very important on-the-ground decisions that really mean something to people. And that is, that's very satisfying for me.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
And we'll go to Mrs. Block, and then we'll finish with Mr. Sousa. Mrs. Block, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Clark, for joining us today. It would appear that your testimony today is consistent with that you made at your first appearance here at committee, in which you continue to deny having any involvement in the purchase process for the new official residence, and that you made no direct complaints about the state of the current residence. Is that correct?
I made no direct complaint to the process. That is correct.
To the process, I'll note that. So to be clear, in response to my colleagues' questions, you testified that it was upon your arrival to the most important mission that Canada has, the first comments you made to those welcoming you were to express concerns about the residence that you were in fact going to be living in. And I'll refer back to the ATIP. I won't quote it because my colleague already did that. But the first comments you made to those welcoming you were to express concerns regarding the completion of the renovation and the refurbishment project. You indicated it was not suitable to be the Consul General's accommodations and that it did not have a floor plan that was ideal for representational activities. You went on to say, and you've testified again today, that somehow there is absolutely no connection to making these comments that were made to those greeting you, that there is absolutely no connection to the actions that took place and the decisions that were made following that. You know, while you refuse to see the connection, I think your staff certainly understood the mission. They understood what they were hearing, and they absolutely understood that you were not happy with the accommodations. You were making those observations right off the get-go, and that they needed to do something about that. You've also stated time and time again that you did not ever talk to anyone about this, and yet in your own letter, and you refused to admit that these comments were made to a colleague, and you said you didn't say that. It's in your letter. Did you write the letter that was sent to this committee?
Mr. Chair, I did.
So in this letter, you said, I was not aware until media reports this week that this comment made in passing to a colleague had been reported by the Consulate General. So my colleague had asked who that colleague was, and you said, I didn't make these comments to a colleague. Which is it? Did you speak to a colleague or did you not?
Mr. Chair, I did, but perhaps just for precision, could you ask me what comments you're referring to? Because if the comments you're referring to are me saying we need a new residence, that simply is not true.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to interrupt you there, Mr. Clark, because this letter that you sent was all about the issue of the kind of influence that you may have exerted over the purchase of this condominium. And so if you want to try and distract and confuse, I'm just going to use the time that I have to keep us on task here. We have received emails and official documents that indicated you were instrumental in getting the ball rolling on the purchase of the new residence. That's why you hurriedly wrote this letter, to say that the comments that were made were only made in passing. And I think we've already debunked that theory that you were only making comments in passing, especially since they were comments made upon your arrival. We also have the official report from Global Affairs Canada. So you see, Mr. Clark, the issue that we are facing here is that you have obviously and shamelessly lied to this committee on multiple occasions. And so my question for you right now is, why don't you just come clean with this committee and Canadians, admit you've lied, follow in Randy Boissonneau's footsteps, and resign?
Indeed. Good job, Kelly.
You have 20 seconds, Mr. Clark.
Mr. Chair, I would just say once again, and I am under oath, I can tell you that everything I have said is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.